Welcome back to Mackey Tech, and today we're going to be walking through a strategy for backing up your UGREEN NAS. In our case, we're going to be using the DXP6800 Pro using a 3-2-1 backup strategy. The idea is to keep at least 3 copies of your important data stored on at least 2 different types of storage media, such as your NAS and an external USB drive, and then 1 copy kept off-site in case something happens at home, like theft or fire or flooding, or the internet goes out or whatever happens. As for what you should be backing up, we're not going to get into that too deeply, but generally speaking, files you access or change regularly should be protected with frequent daily or weekly backups. More important files that rarely change or can't be replaced or recreated, like your family photos, old home movies, financial, medical documents, taxes, are usually better suited for long-term archival storage and maybe some form of version history. So for our first backup, we're going to be backing up one of our UGREEN NAS 6800 folders to a USB drive that's externally connected. Ideally, you'll want to automate this backup so it runs daily or weekly, like maybe in the middle of the night when no one is using the NAS. Now, the interesting thing about the UGREEN OS's Sync and Backup app is it doesn't appear to have an option for backing up to a USB drive at first glance. But in fact, if you click on New and then select Backup Between Storage Pools, there's actually an option to back up any of your UGREEN NAS folders to an external USB drive, despite the USB drive, or external drive in this case, not being part of any established storage pool. So first we'll select our source folder, which is the USB 6800 backup from the backup list on the left, and then click Next, and then select our external drive from the destination folder, and we'll click Next, and then we can select one of the options for either mirrored backup or incremental backup, and then we have scheduling options which allow multiple versions of this backup. And then we'll click Confirm and let it run. Next, we'll go into our file manager and double check that our files copied over, which they did. For the next part of our 3-2-1 backup strategy, we're going to be using a UGREEN DXP2800 as our backup destination for our DXP6800 Pro. We'll first do a backup locally using Rsync while both devices are connected to the same network, and then we'll move the DXP2800 offsite for our remote backup. Now, if you don't have another UGREEN NAS, you could use a Linux server or a TrueNAS install or any system capable of receiving backups through Rsync. The setup will vary, but the destination generally needs a Rsync service or module, a folder that your backup user can write to, and port 873 available, unless you're using Rsync or SSH or you have selected a different port. First, let's make sure that Rsync is enabled on both NAS systems. So on our source NAS, the 6800, we'll go into File Service and click Rsync, and then make sure it's enabled, and then click Advanced to check our port number, which should be 873. Next, we'll create a backup folder and call it 6800 NAS Backup, and we'll put some files in it. Then after verifying Rsync is enabled, we'll need to create an Rsync user for our 6800 NAS, which we'll use very shortly when we do our backup. Now back on our 6800 NAS, we'll select Backup and Restore and click Add. Then click Backup this UGREEN NAS. We'll click New Connection. Make sure Rsync is selected from the options and enter the destination NAS's IP address in the server address box. And we'll leave transmission encryption off. And then we'll enter the Rsync username and password we just created for our 2800 UGREEN and click Confirm. And then we'll select our source folders, and then below select the destination folder we created before. Then you can create a schedule for the backup, and you can do weekly, daily, or even a custom schedule. And then you can set up how many backups you want to keep. And here is the summary showing our backup schedule. So make sure everything looks good, and we'll tag the option to perform a backup now so we can make sure that it's working, and click Confirm and let it run. Now let's jump into the file manager and do another check to make sure that our first manual backup was successful. And yep, there it is, we're all good. Now before you get too crazy with remote backups, I would recommend you do your local backup first of what you're backing up. That way you're not spending days trying to transfer files over the internet if you're backing up like a terabyte or 2 terabytes or whatever. After that, your subsequent backups done remotely will be much smaller since you're only transferring new or changed files. It's also a good idea to make sure your ISP doesn't have any monthly data caps at both locations, and keep in mind that the upload speed at the source will usually be your main bottleneck. For our purposes, I'm going to place my DXP2800 at my in-laws as the remote backup destination for my 6800, and we're going to attempt remote backups using the 2800's remote client ID. I'm also going to be testing out TailScale, which has been installed and configured on both NASs. So let's grab our DXP2800 NAS and head over to my in-laws to get it set up. Hey tech fans, okay, so here I am at my in-laws, and this is the DXP2800, and we're going to plug this into my in-laws internet and their power, and then we'll fire it up, and then we'll start the backup process. So let's go. Now, just to clarify, my 6800 Pro is back at home, so both NAS systems are on completely separate networks, and you can see I'm connected to each one in a separate browser window using their respective remote URLs. As mentioned, my original plan was to use the DXP2800 UGREEN client ID as the destination server address for a backup from the 6800. I put the same pictures in the 6800 source folder to be backed up as we used for our local backup previously. However, as you can see in the Backup and Sync app, the backup option keeps rejecting the 2800's remote client ID. So after a few troubleshooting attempts, I figured I would try the sync option of the app, and then the client ID was accepted, so I created a scheduled sync task from the 6800 to the 2800. I then told it to run immediately, and after a couple of false starts, I was able to get my pictures synced over successfully to the 2800. So then it was time to try the same backup and sync test using only TailScale, and I decided to use just a TailScale YAML file as the source of backup, and was pleased to see that the 2800's TailScale IP worked in the server address field. I then continued with scheduling the backup and started the first backup. However, I was a little confused that it started to create all of these odd extra folders on the 2800, and I didn't see any YAML file. So I decided to look a little more closely, and most of them were just empty and were probably put there as part of the multi-version backup repository that UGREEN OS normally creates. So a backup is only worthwhile if you can actually restore it. So I wanted to test to make sure that this actually worked. So after the backup finished on the 2800, the next day I selected restore from the top and was actually able to restore the entire backup, which was, just one file from the 2800. I selected the existing TailScale IP connection to the backup folder on the 2800 NAS, which is now remote. I then created a new folder on my 6800 for the restore file, just so I wouldn't get them mixed up. And the YAML file we backed up yesterday came right over. I also tested TailScale for the sync process as I did with the UGREEN remote ID, and it worked just fine. Now, the other week, I showed how to set up TailScale through Docker on a UGREEN NAS, and I'll leave that link in the video description. If you'd rather use TailScale instead of UGREENLink for this remote backup, because obviously UGREENLink doesn't work, make sure you install it on both NAS devices and make sure they appear in the same tailnet on your TailScale account. Then use the destination NAS's TailScale IP address as the server address when creating the backup task. As I mentioned in the beginning, you want to make sure you have at least 3 copies of your data, 2 of which are on different media like a USB or another hard drive, and ideally one that's remote, maybe at your office or a friend's house, or even on a USB drive in a safety deposit box, as long as it's something that you can easily access. And please drop me your thoughts in the comment section as to how you're backing up your own data. Your setup might give someone else an idea for improving their own backup strategy. Anyway, that's going to wrap up another video. If you got something useful or helpful out of this, please make sure to give us a like and make sure that you are subscribed to Mackey Tech if you haven't done so already. A special shout out to all of my Patreon supporters. You know exactly who you are. Thank you all for watching, and we'll be talking to you again very soon.